We have our container created, but if it's on our workstation, it won't do others much good. So this module we're going to learn about using the Azure Container Registry. Azure Container Registry gives us the ability to store our containers in what's called a private registry or private Docker registry. This means that others can access those containers. Additionally, it can be utilized with Azure Kubernetes Service, App Services, Service Fabric, Batch, or Azure Container Instances, which we'll learn about coming up. The big advantage here, it's stored in a location that others can access, and more importantly, that other resources can pull from in order to run those containers. Additionally, there's also the Azure Container Registry tasks. And what that does is it's a feature that gives you the ability to automatically test to ensure your containers build properly. It can also update dependencies within the container or the base images to help address any security vulnerabilities. So if Microsoft was to release an update to one of the base images that were in our example container, whether it's the SDK or the runtime, Azure Container Registry tasks would be able to apply those updates to our container and then verify they are still building successfully. We talked a little bit about some of the Docker commands when we built our image. However, there are a few more commands that I think we need to know about as we start to move our images from our workstation up to the Azure Container Registry. The first one is Docker pull, and while we might not be using this one today, it is helpful to know that you can use this command to pull an image from a registry, whether that's a private registry like the Azure Container Resource or a public registry like Docker Hub. You can still use that same command for both. Docker tag. This creates a link between a target image and a source image. For our example, we'll be using this to specify the target path for the sample image that we created. And finally, Docker push. What this does is it takes an image and pushes it up to a registry, whether that's, again, Azure Container Registry or ACR or Docker Hub or some other registry that you're using. Let's walk through the steps that are needed to push an image to an Azure Container Registry. To do this, we're going to use a combination of Azure CLI and Docker commands. The first thing we need to do is authenticate with the Azure Container Registry. This is where Azure CLI comes into play. You can see we're running the command ACR login, and then we're specifying the container registry name, in this case, Skylines Demo ACR. Next, we're going to tag the image. And if we remember, this is where we basically associate a target for an existing image. So while it looks like this command is split over two lines, unfortunately, it's just the way it had to happen in order to make the text fit on the slide. But we're running Docker tag, we're specifying our source image, which is ASP.NET Example 0.1, and then we're specifying the target, which in this case is Skylines Demo ACR.io in the demo repository with the image ASP.NET Example version 0.1. And then finally, we're going to use Docker push to take our source image and push it to the target location. So again, the command Docker push, specifying the target. Since we ran the tag command above, it knows where that source image is, and it will then take that and push it to the location. One thing worth noting is that you can see all Azure ACRs are going to have AzureCR.io as part of the URL. That's a dead giveaway that you are working with an Azure Container Registry. So with that said, let's take the sample image that we created earlier and let's push it up to an Azure Container Registry. So here we are in Azure. You can see we've got the Skylines Demo Container Registry already created. If you go down here and look at repository on the left, you can see we currently have an empty repository. So let's jump back to Visual Studio Code. And as we talked about in the PowerPoint, we're going to walk through the following steps to associate or log into the Azure Container Registry. We're going to tag the sample container image that we created earlier and associate that with the Skylines Demo Azure Container Registry. And then finally, we're going to push that container image up to Skylines Demo ACR. So that first, we'll go ahead and again, we're just going to log in using the Azure ACR login command, specifying the container registry that we're attempting to authenticate with. Looks like that completed successfully. So now we're going to go ahead and do the tag command. And again, this is associating a source image with a target image. In this case, we're using the sample container registry, or excuse me, the sample container image we created earlier with the Skylines ACR, and that completed. So now finally, we're going to go ahead and push that container up. So let's go ahead and copy that last command and paste it. And here we should actually see much in the same way when we created our container to where it had to download the image or download the SDK as well as the runtime. Now we're taking that and we're pushing it up to Azure Container Registry. So essentially, Docker push. So we'll give this here another second or two to finish up. And look like everything's uploaded. So now let's go back to our Azure Container Registry in the portal. Let's do a refresh here. Perfect. We can see in the demo repository, we've got our ASP.NET example. If we open that up, we can see we've got an example up here with the 0.1 tag. Awesome. So now that it's uploaded, let's go back and figure out what we can do with this image now that it's in the ACR.